Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. It's episode 67. I'm your host, Jim R. Today we're going to be interviewing Chris O. How you doing, Chris?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So let's dive into our conversation here. Tell me about your childhood growing up.
So I'm originally from a small city called Elyria. It's out north towards Cleveland in Northeast Ohio. Was born there and pretty much raised my whole entire life. Grew up with two parents, my mom and dad. So my mom had a little bit of a background with addiction. I've come to find out later in life. My father was an alcoholic. My dad stopped drinking probably around the time that I was 2, so I don't really remember him drinking very much. But growing up was a little bit difficult, and I think that's kind of where my story starts. I was sexually molested when I was 5 years old from a neighbor across the street. And long story short, I remember going to my mom and telling her about it, and it actually kind of helped her get help because she was actually molested and raped by her brothers when she was younger. But back in the day, that really wasn't talked as much. People didn't really go out and get the help like they can now. It was kind of shadowed or hush hush. A lot of families didn't really discuss that type of thing.
That must
But
have
it was
really, been a big weight to hold for a young child.
It was confusing. I like looking back, like I didn't really know, I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't really know how to feel because there was a lot of emotions when I was younger. I went from like a happy spirited kid to like very angry and very distant from people. I like just trying to like think about it and go back, like it's crazy to think because like I don't really know when it started, but I became a very angry person really, really early in life. Had to go to counseling 5, 6, all the way up until I was like 12, 13, 14 years old. Um,
Did you
but
tell the counselor?
yeah, I told the counselor. I ended up having to talk to the police, the counselors, psychiatrist. I went through it all.
So how was your life at school like? Was it like a reprieve for you?
Um, School was difficult. I put on a lot of weight. I think I had that addict mentality because I ate a lot, kind of covered my feelings with food. And like I said, looking back, I didn't realize I was doing all this until I got older. Um, but I would literally just eat and eat and eat. And kids would literally make fun of me, of my weight issues, and I would act out. I did not let anybody, make fun of me without me either acting out or saying something. So school, I was always in trouble. My first expulsion, I was like in third grade, getting kicked out of school. So, like I said, my childhood, I was very, very angry a
What'd you do
lot.
to get expelled?
Um, in third grade, I believe it was just a fight. Um, I can't remember exactly what it was over, but I know that I've gotten in trouble quite a few times up to that point. But then something had happened where I'd acted out physically. I don't know if it was like me throwing something. I can't exactly remember, but I know that it. I ended up couldn't go on the zoo trip in third grade because I was expelled from school. Like I said, I was very physically and like I said, even speaking out, like I would not let anybody, make fun of me without some type of repercussion, I guess. So yeah,
It's
it was
funny that
hard.
you remember it's funny you remember you couldn't go to the zoo. It's interesting the little details that we do remember.
Yeah, it was the first trip to the zoo I would have been able to go to.
Yeah, it probably was important for you, but you didn't get to go.
No.
So at what point did you first use any type of substance?
So I can remember, I think it was right before high school. So like 7th or 8th grade. I think it was about 8th grade. I had this girl that lived across the street, and I had a little crush or whatever, and she was like, first she said,
Hold on for a moment. If you can hear me, you're freezing up. Sorry, folks, for whoever is listening. Technical difficulties. All right, here you are. You're back.
there we go. But
Um,
yeah, just like she's, was like, oh, I have this, this pot or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. I do that, and
yeah.
I never smoked pot. Um, and, it actually was the first time I started smoking cigarettes. Because, my parents smoked, I was around it all the time. And I knew what inhaling and exhaling is like. If I've actually inhaled, like, I thought it was crazy to me. I remember smoking my first cigarette, like hiding in the backyard, like, and hitting it and being like, oh my God, I actually inhaled. And I don't know if it's because like during the 90s and stuff like that, everybody, a lot of people, and smoking was completely different. People didn't view it as like they did like back then, like now. So I was around a lot of secondhand smoke. So I remember when I first smoked my first cigarette, I actually inhaled it, which to me was like surprising. I'm like, oh my God, I know how to smoke, Thought it was like cool at the time, little did I know, like years later, I'd still be smoking cigarettes. But so yeah, we smoked a little bit of weed when I was in like 8th grade. So I was like 14, maybe 15, closer to 14, I believe. Anyway, and I remember uh staring out the front window because the house was corner to our house, which was like on the other side of the street, but 2 houses over. So I could like parallel with the house. I can remember looking at the windows and being like, oh my God, how am I going to get in there? Like both my parents were home, it's the first time I ever smoked weed. I didn't know how long it lasted or what was going to happen. It was all new to me, but I remember I liked it, you know, I do remember I liked it. I had a good time, so to say. Um, but I would say not even much further down the road after that, I remember I had a kid in school who brought a bottle of vodka in a water bottle. And, I never have drank or anything like that. But I think I was in that transition of like, okay, these kids are starting to accept me, for who I am. Like I said, from the time I was in 2nd and 3rd grade all the way up into middle school, I really didn't have many friends and kind of stayed to myself. Um, but I think that was like the transition period of like of me feeling like accepted. So I remember him bringing a bottle, like a clear water bottle of vodka, and he had it mixed with some like I think flavored water or whatever. But I remember drinking it, and I remember sitting in history class, literally falling asleep, passing out in history class, drunk. But I never did get caught. I don't know how I didn't get caught, but I never got caught. So those were my first 2 times I say with any sort of substance, um, probably around that time period.
So at what point did you think you had a problem?
Well, um, I would have to say it'd be way later in life. Um, I went through a good long
Well,
period.
we'll get to that in a minute then if it's way further. Real quick, my other question is tell me about high school. How was it? How was you in your social life? Was it affected by drugs and alcohol, your social life?
In high school, not so much. I didn't really. That wasn't the time where I'd say I picked off and ran with it. It'd be scattered here and out. But high school, I would say, was just as bad as any other time in school. I started to get friends. I actually got uplifted from one school district to a complete other, um, right near the end of my 8th grade year. I was originally in my city school district, but because I was in, well, it was a couple different things. Because I was in so much trouble, and I was a troubled kid, I'd say. Um, Between that and then the line of the school district changed, and it actually changed previously, but they allowed me to keep going to the same school because I went to it for so long. But I pretty much got kicked out of one school district, which was like a city district, and then put into a whole different school district, which was pretty much country type, style, completely different. than where I was from. And I like I said, I don't think it was much better. If anything, it was kind of worse because I had at least some sort of familiarity with like the city schools and like the same people I went to school with, whether if I got along with everybody or not. And then having to go to a completely different school where it's like literally like, they live for like the county fair and stuff like that. It was a complete change up, but I was also in trouble in high school. Um, my first ninth grade year, and I say first because there was a couple of them, I
Yeah.
ended up getting expelled for selling Valium in school. I was never physically caught. Nobody actually seen, the pills, luckily, because I probably would have got charged. But I ended up getting expelled for selling, Valium or Klonopin. I can't remember which one it was. And I literally got expelled that first year in ninth grade. And then my second year, I remember I wanted to go to online schooling and my parents wouldn't let me. It's free, like the state pays for it. They send you a computer, everything. I was like, oh God, yes, I don't have to go to school. I remember telling my parents, and my mom was kind of on board, but my dad had to say so. Um, and my dad and I didn't really have the best relationship growing up. But he pretty much made it so I couldn't do it. And I remember sitting there like, how can I do this? How can I persuade, or what can I do to be able to do online schooling so I didn't have to go to public school anymore? And I literally was sitting on the bus, got on the bus that morning, and I remember talking with amongst a few different people, and I said, what can I do to get thrown out of school? Like thrown out of school. What can I, it's crazy to think, but what can I do to get thrown out of school? And some people threw out this idea and threw out this idea. And I was like, well, what if I make a hit list? Well, I'll just make a hit list and I'll get thrown out of school. And I remember people on the bus were like, oh, put me number one and put me this number and put me that. So like, obviously it wasn't real, but in the times that we live in, even if it was 12, 13 years ago, it was still, a big deal, and I remember I had somebody walk down to the office and say, hey, I found this hit list. And the crazy thing is that not only did I tell people, but I put my last name on the top of it, and it said my last name's hit list, so unbelievable. But anyway, so I remember her going down to the office, and then somebody from the office came up when they needed me in the office. And I walked into the principal's office and he's like, why do you think I'm here? Why do you think that you're here? And I remember saying, oh, I already know why I'm here. I said, I made a hit list, this, and that. It's not real. I just don't want to be in school anymore. And he was like, what do you mean it's not real? And I explained to him, like, most of the people on there, I even put George Bush on there,
Yeah.
which is probably not a smart idea.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
it's true. It's technically
um,
against the law.
Yeah. So he's like, well, he's like, and not saying I don't believe you, Chris. And, they talked to a couple other students, but he's like, we have to go forward with this. I had to contact the police. So the police end up coming. And I remember them sitting there talking to me. And I literally told them pretty much all the same thing. Like, this is fake. Explaining to them that I don't want to be in school anymore. I don't want to be here. I'd rather be homeschooled. And they were like, just talking, and they kind of slipped in my rights. I remember them slipping in my rights, right, kind of like right in there, right as they were talking, like, your rights, right? Like, you had to say everything, and I thought I was in the clear because after I was talking to the police, I remember walking into my guidance counselor's office, and I think they had separated the girl that I sent to the office because she also got in trouble because she was an accomplice. So she ended up going into the principal's office with the police, and I came out. That I was sitting in the guidance counselor's office, and I thought that like everything was fine. I thought I was in the clear. I thought, okay, I'm not going to get in trouble like to that extent of like the law or whatever. And literally about 10, 15 minutes later, I remember them walking in and said, you know, Christopher, you put your hands behind your back, set your stuff down. You're being arrested for menacing, inducing panic, and causing false alarms. And literally, that was the first time I ever got arrested. And yeah, definitely something I won't forget because I made the local newspaper. Um, they twisted everything around. They said that I was facing more charges. My grandfather, who I was really, really close to, he was like my father to me. I remember him picking me up um, after I got out of juvie, because I spent 24 hours in juvie. And I remember him picking me up um, and saying, Grandpa's disappointed in you. He goes, that's not the sort of stuff I want to read in the newspaper about you. But he wasn't like angry, like screaming at me. He was just really disappointed. Like I remember him just being really hurt. Like he wasn't, yelling at me or anything like that. He was just really, really hurt.
And
Um,
that's what usually hurts us the most. Is I think everyone's heard the saying, I'm not mad at you, I'm disappointed. That's like worse, especially if you care about that person's opinion. Like, I'm assuming you did about grandfather.
yep, yep. Um, that was definitely, like I said, that was that's kind of where I say it all kind of kick started, really. Because I ended up getting kicked out of high school. I got expelled. I got the full expulsion date, which I think is like a 90 or 120. I don't know, whatever it is. I got basically kicked out the whole year. I couldn't even do online schooling. So my third year of being in ninth grade, I did online schooling because at that point, you know, I think I was so much trouble that my parents were like, okay, like, what else are we gonna do? Like, I remember, my mom always tried dealing with like my outburst. I remember she would call like the police and they would pink slip me and tell her like, oh, keep filling out these slips, and we'll ended up getting him involved at the
What's a
courts or
pink
anything like
slip?
that.
What do you
So it's
mean
pretty much
pink?
like a slip. It's a slip that you fill out whenever your child is, I don't know how many states or counties do it, but you fill out this form, and it like if your kid is acting unruly, like breaking things or like literally to the point of like screaming and hitting things or whatever, they can pretty much fill these out, and then they would send them into like the juvenile courts or whatever, and they would set up a case. And after you got so many pink slips, then the police and the law would get involved as a kid. So my mom would fill those out. Um, which honestly, I never, back then as a kid, I'd be angry, but like even during my addiction, like I would think about it, like I never held that against my mom. I was a really, really bad child. And like I said, my father was never really there. My father would only be there to he made fun of me growing up, call me names like fat ass and things like that. And I remember I still to this day, I like pro wrestling, and he would make fun of me about it, and certain music I listened to. And, he was more so of like, I don't know, he almost felt like the kids I went to school with, he wasn't like more so like a father. It's kind of a bully. But so during high school, my parents pretty much, I think, got to the point um, where they were just done. I remember my dad came home drunk. He was epileptic, so if he would drink one or two beers, it'd be like he drank like four or five with his medication. So he drank like a six pack. So it was like he drank like 12, 13 beers, and he hadn't drank in years prior. And he came home and chased me around the yard. I was on the phone with my then girlfriend at the time. And was just chasing me around the yard while he was drinking. And I remember my mom like telling him like to leave me alone. And then sometime between that and the next day, I remember, it's kind of like a blackout. I can't remember exactly in between, but I'll never forget the next day, my dad threw a coffee cup full of hot coffee like towards my mom's head. And luckily it didn't hit her in the head, but it hit the ceiling. And that was my mom's breaking point. My mom was like, I'm done with this, you
Do you
know.
remember what happened that led to your father doing that?
They were just arguing. I can't remember what they were arguing about. Probably money. Um, my father would control all the money. My mom worked, and like they shared a bank account, but my dad pretty much every little cent that was spent, rather if it was a credit card or a debit card or even actual money, physical money, my dad literally knew every single thing and would always question my mom. I mean, the littlest of things, like I remember my father getting upset because I needed lunch money for school. And my mom literally had to ask somebody at her job for a couple dollars so I could have money for lunch because my dad wouldn't give it to me. That was just how my dad was.
Wow. I wonder what went through his head and what he expected you to do. You know what I mean? Like if your mother hypothetically couldn't do that, that's a pretty shitty thing to do.
Right. It was
Once you
difficult.
graduate high school, what do you do?
What's that?
So once you graduate high school, what do you end up doing with your life?
So I didn't end up graduating. I ended up going to get my GED. I
Oh,
was
that's
supposed to
right, because
graduate.
you were homeschooled.
Yeah, and so real quickly, when I did the ECOT, I never logged in. So that was the online school, and it was called ECOT. It was like Electric Classrooms of Tomorrow, a thing in
Okay.
Ohio. And I started to log in, every so often, but then I remember I wouldn't log in but every other day. So that way I still stayed active, but I wasn't really doing the work. So obviously it was no better for me than public school. I just didn't have to deal with the people and deal with kids making fun of me or whatever, getting in fights. So I pretty much blew that off. Skipping to when I was 18 years old, so when should have graduated, ended up getting kicked out of online schooling. And then when I got kicked out, I went and got my GED. Somehow, surprisingly, I was able to get my GED. Like I said, I didn't pay attention in school. I didn't like school at all. So I don't know how I retained any of that information, but I was able to pass and actually go to the fast track GED class. So where I only had to go for a couple of months, and I got to take my test pretty quick. And then rather than a normal whenever you're ready type of GED class, which some people go for months and months before they get to take the test. So obviously I wasn't dumb. And I passed my GED test in 2009. So a year later, almost after I was supposed to graduate. So I was 19 years old. And I think this is where most of it really started was in 2009. My grandfather had passed away. And like I said, I was really close to him. He was a really, religious God, family man. He was just a really good guy. I mean, baseball games, um, basketball, wrestling, band practice, anything that I did outside of school, my grandfather was there. And if my mom could make it, if she wasn't working, she would be there. But my grandfather was always there. And I'd go to church with him all the way through. I was 18. Once he told me I didn't have to go to church when I was 18, I was like, oh, I quit going to church. And, I almost wish I didn't stop going to church, because for almost that whole year, I was less time with my grandfather. Little did I know that he was going to get sick. And he got pneumonia because my grandfather originally retired and wanted to go back to work because he was pretty much bored. So he went to work for Walmart and was a door greeter and ended up getting pneumonia, and it never turned back. He got really, really sick, ended up having to go to the hospital. And I remember this was December of 2009. My family, my grandmother and everybody were like, he's not going to make it. And this was 2 days before Christmas. They're like, we can take him off they can take him off the machine, but if they take him off the machine, he's not going to live. We don't want to do it until after Christmas. We at least want to celebrate Christmas, and then we'll take him off. So my grandfather fully passed away on the 26th of 2009. And I'd say that would be where it really all kind of kickstarted with me. I became angry with God, the idea of God. I didn't understand why God would, do this to me or make somebody suffer who was such a good person. I mean, my grandfather was the type of person who they were married for 57, 56 years, worked to provide for his family. There was never, my grandfather didn't go out and cheat on my grandmother. I mean, my grandpa was a really good, honest, hardworking family man. Like, from back the way that always used to be, that's just how it was. And I was so angry, and the thought of how could a God do this? Like, what am I going to do? Like, I feel like I lost not only my grandfather, my father, but my best friend. And 2009 leading to 2010, my mother would let me have people over, and drink and smoke, do drugs, whatever. And her thought process was, if I do this, I know that he's going to not be in trouble. I know that he's going to be home safe. I know that, I know that he's not going to get in trouble with the law. I know that he's okay. And that was her logic, you know.
She allowed
Before I,
you.
and before I go on with that, I like now it like I sit there and I think about it. I'm like, wow, like I really wish, you know, my mom was more of a mom than as a friend, because that kind of hurt me. And I'll get to that. So 2010, going to 2010. I remember I started taking ecstasy, and I absolutely loved it. I remember how it made me feel. I was happy, um, you know. And then the ecstasy became we're having parties every day. So mom was allowing me to have these parties. We'd have almost 100 to 80 people in this apartment, you know. And I thought I was like, oh my God, I'm the cool kid. I'm finally here. Like, look at this. I got everybody here. They're at this party. Everybody's having a great time. Everybody's, you know, laughing and playing beer pong and, you know, and I think that's kind of like I said, where it started, because I didn't process or deal with my grandfather. So for almost that whole year, and I do not exaggerate when I say this, that whole year, I took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ecstasy tablets and Molly and stuff like that. Um, and I didn't eat very much. I lived off bush beer and pot and, you know, the occasional line of cocaine or whatever. Like, you know, I thought I was having a great time. You know, and here I am 21 years old going, you know, and I'm like, this is great. Like, everybody's like, oh, Chris is having a party, you know. So it's like I went from like way over here to like nobody wanted to be around Chris to, you know, Chris is the party, like, you know, oh, Chris knows where this is at and Chris knows that, you know. So, you know, looking back, I think, like I said, it was, here I am being accepted again. Like, it felt good all while I'm feeling good, you know.
Yeah.
And that went on for, you know, for about a year or two. And then the opioid pandemic started kind of happening. And I was going to a doctor. So not much happened between there and there, just a lot of ecstasy, cocaine, alcohol, random, you know, random pills here and there. Pretty much, like I said, I thought it was normal. But I was able to put all that down, you
Where
know.
were where were you able to find all these different drugs?
Um, so pretty much I knew from other people that I had partied with, they would connect me with these people. Next thing you know, I started selling them. So I was not only doing them, but I was selling them. And I was pretty much the life of the party, or providing all the fun, you know, all while I was not really making money, but I wasn't losing money. I was partying for free, you know. So I didn't have to waste my money on drugs because I was making it back, and then I would just, you know, just it was just a process.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was like that for about a year and a half. And that's kind of like right when about 2011, 2012, when the opioid, like, you know, the opioid pandemic really started. You start hearing about the fentanyl and stuff like that. But I started going to the doctor. Somebody told me, hey, you know, there's this doctor, he'll write you these scripts or whatever. Because I was kind of messing with a little bit of like Percocets here and there, but I didn't know how much of a grasp it had on me until later. But I had a bad back, so I used that as an excuse because I have degenerate disc disease, sciatica, pinched nerve. It's not fun, but I had this doctor would really like literally write me 60 to 80 Percocets every 2 weeks, and
Wow.
uh, and I was like, this is awesome, you know, and I thought it was awesome, and long story short, I ended up losing my insurance. So when I lost my insurance, I had no way to get the pills anymore. And I think that right there is when I realized, like, I'm screwed. I'm fucked. I'm addicted to these things. I don't feel good when I have them. Like all these other drugs and alcohol that I picked up, I was, you know, I loved doing them, but I was able to put them down. I didn't I didn't feel like I needed to have those things, you know.
How did
Um,
you lose your insurance?
I ended up losing my insurance because, I can't remember what happened. It was a state covered insurance. I know what had happened. So and I was trying to skip around, but 2018 or 2008, I had my oldest daughter. Um, so I became a dad, and when I had became a dad or whatever, I was able to get state insurance because me and my ex, you know, were together and we had a kid together. We lived together, And at that point in time where I had lost my insurance is because I had moved out. We'd split up. Things were not good between us. She pretty much grew up. I didn't, you know? So we
Yeah.
went two separate ways. So I moved back home, and that's kind of like where like I said, it's kind of all started with me like party and stuff like that. So I lost my insurance. Once they found out that I pretty much had moved out, they took my insurance away. So for like good 4 or 5, 6 months, I was having insurance. I was able to go to the doctor. But when she started filing for stuff and filing for child support, they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, he don't have insurance. We need to take his insurance away. They're not together." The state covered insurance. So I lost my insurance because they had found out that we were no longer together. So I wasn't working at that time, I remember. So I had no insurance. So I hit the streets and started buying them off the streets. And like everybody else that knows, like that has any idea with like how, remember how it was when this pandemic with the heroin and the fentanyl all started. They started going after the doctors and the pharmaceutical companies that made them. And then it's like the street dried up. And when the street dried up, all the prices went up. And I remember having this guy that I was buying pills from originally. He came in, this was 2012. It was 2 days after New Year's. And he came in and he had said, "Try this." He goes, "I promise you, you're going to love it." He goes, "And you only have to do a little bit." And he's like, "And you won't be sick and you won't need it for a long time and this and this and that." And I was like, "I don't know." And he goes, "I promise you, I wouldn't steer you wrong." And that was the first time I ever did heroin. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I remember being like, "Oh my God, I really don't even have to do, but it was like a wee little bit, and I'm thinking this is amazing." And little did I know, like literally that was a downward spiral more into like my addiction. And it went on like that. There's literally horror stories. Like I've seen, that type of lifestyle is not, there's not fun. Like there's never no end of the rainbow where it was a pot of gold. Like, usually you're going to end up dead or in jail or, or homeless, or, I mean, you can go on and on. Like it never ends well, but that first time I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And I was able to pick it up and put it down, every other day for like maybe a couple weeks, but not even much more longer after that. Like literally I was doing it every day. It became just like the pills. I needed it, and I needed it like multiple times throughout the day. And um and I would only either smoke it or snort it. So I was like, at least I'm not doing this. I'm not sticking a needle in my arm. Yeah, that lasted about 4 or 5 months because
Mhm.
my friend at the time that I grew up with, over those like course of that 5, 6 years after high school and stuff, he would start injecting it. And he was like, "I'll do it for you." And I remember, letting him do it. And I was just like, "Oh my God, like, this is crazy. Like, this is amazing. Like this is all I'm thinking about, and
What made you decide to let him do that? Was there
because
anything?
I seen him do it, and I was getting to that point where like I never had that good feeling anymore. It's like I was chasing that good feeling, um, like the first time of using it. Um,
Yeah.
Never had that same feeling again. I wanted that feeling, that warmth, that rush, and I let him do it because I didn't know how to do it, you know. And yeah, I did it the first time, and I thought it was amazing. And then I remember when I was gonna let him do it a second time, he went and did his, and he OD'd in my mom's apartment.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I was freaking out, and this is before Narcan and stuff like that. Or like Narcan wasn't readily available then, but he OD'd in my mom's apartment. And I remember like, trying to give him CPR, slapping his face, throwing water on his face. He would not come to. And then something, I don't know how I knew to do this, but I remember I had a Suboxone strip and I stuck it on his tongue, underneath his tongue, um, and I kept doing CPR and stuff like that. And he finally woke up. And then minutes later, after he finally woke up, he started getting sick. Um, and he was like, "Oh, why did you do that?" And you know, why'd you put that in my mouth? And I'm like, dude, you were dead. And, you know, just like anybody else, usually when they wake up from something like that, they're like, what the hell? Why'd you do that? You know, which is crazy to think, you know,
I
but he
hear that
didn't.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. Why did you hit me with that Narcan for? Or why did you do this? Why did you do that? I'm fine. Like,
But that's
no,
another
you're not
thing.
fine.
What happens is I forgot I was watching a documentary and they said basically what happens is it just really feels like shit. Like they when they wake up, they feel like shit. And that's why they're angry usually.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can understand you're going to sleep. Well, you don't really realize that you're going to sleep or you're but overdosing, and then you think you feel good, and then all of a sudden you wake up and there's all these people around you, and you're waking up hurling and throwing up and angry, and your body's shaking. I mean, I guess it would be. I've been lucky enough to never have to be Narcan. I don't know how I've never had to be Narcan. I'm thankful. I know that I've had plenty of blackouts, you know, but I've never had to be Narcan. It doesn't mean I've never overdosed. I might just been lucky,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I can't say I've experienced that feeling, but the horrors that literally that drug had on me for years. I mean, from the time I was 2011, 2012, all the way up until literally about a year ago, like that drug had the biggest hold on me than anything ever, you know. And I would literally get stints of sobriety, 6 months, 8 months, 4 months, 2 months, 30 days, 2 weeks. I mean, I've done it all, a year, and I would just literally go right back to it, you know. Um, and it's literally, I mean, the stories and the things that I have seen in that type of use, like it's just not worth it. And it's like you literally, I felt like literally I was just devoting my life just to have that drug, just to feel normal. And it's crazy to think like I took this drug to feel good. Now I need this drug to feel normal so I can live a normal life and go to work, or, you know, and be a normal person. You know what I'm saying? To not feel
Yeah.
sick. It's insanity. Like whenever I think about it, it's like, wow, it's so mind blowing. And my last relapse, I remember I went out and used because of an ex-girlfriend, because she told me I was a junkie and that I was going to overdose and that's all I'll ever be and this and that. And my mentality at the time, because I wasn't working a program or wasn't working on myself or wasn't doing what I needed to do to stay sober, was like, oh, I'll go show her. And I started using again, and really quickly right back to the needle. You pick up where they left off. That's what they always say. And I definitely agree with that, because that was, yeah, that was just something that, it's just crazy how much of a grip that had on me, because like I said, I was able to literally pick up every other drug and put them down, you know. But with that, it literally was like a blanket. It made me feel happy, it made me feel good, that warm feeling, that, I guess, that acceptance feeling. Like I didn't really care what others thought of me, like, because I felt good, so I didn't really care, you know. And how quickly that all went away whenever I didn't have that, and literally just working and stealing and doing whatever I need to do just so I can feel normal. Like it's crazy, all because nobody wants to go through the hell of that withdrawal. And especially with like the fentanyl now, it's not like how it used to be. People are on withdrawal, you know, it comes faster, but it lasts longer because it sticks in your cells for so much longer. Unlike actual how heroin and Percocets and stuff like that was, like, people are the withdrawal is 10 times worse, I feel. And mentally and physically it lasts a lot longer. It's not even worth it, you know.
Yeah. Fentanyl is something that I think I've mentioned this before on the show that I've seen it or I've heard of it being put in marijuana. You get your weed and it's got fentanyl in it. Like that's crazy. Because what happens is sometimes people enter rehab and you know when you get there, well, at least for mine, they give you a drug test.
Yep.
Some people test positive for fentanyl and they say, oh, all I do is smoke weed. How did the fentanyl get in there? And if they're not lying, I mean, because there's really no point of lying to the rehab. It's not like they're going to do anything. They accept everybody. Like I said, at least mine did.
Right.
So my next question, tell us about your recovery.
So like I said, my last relapse, I stopped working a program. What's cool about, recovery nowadays, I feel, is that there's so many different ways to stay and get sober. A lot of the old timers, some of them, not all of them, in the rooms are becoming more accepting because things are changing. This isn't, this fentanyl and everything else. It's literally killing, and it's like every year for the last couple of years, we see like the death rates are just higher and higher, each year. And I think a lot of them are starting to accept like, okay, there's multiple ways to do this. And what worked for me is going to meetings, and getting honest, and not only like being honest with other people, but with myself, because I've learned that I can literally believe my own lies. I literally would tell myself things and I literally would believe them. Like further down the line, I'm like, no, that's not true. And little did I, thinking back at it, it's like I literally would tell myself these lies, like honesty, going to these meetings. I had to go to a counseling. I got a peer supporter that really helps. And I did do maintenance for quite a while. Like I said, everything's different for every other people.
Yeah.
I chose Suboxone. There was methadone and everything like that, but I knew that methadone wasn't going to work for me. I knew what I would do with the methadone, maybe not right then and there, but further down the line, but everybody's got their own way. And that's what's
Is
cool about it.
methadone stronger? Is that the reason?
Yeah, so like unlike with like Suboxone, there's a cap. You could take multiple Suboxones and it's not going to make you feel any different. Methadone, you could take more and more and you could literally get a buzz off of it. Like
Yeah.
even people that's been, on it prescribed, if they go and take like double the dose or whatever and they never done that, they're going to get high. And I mean, that's just me. And I don't go against anybody that tries methadone, but that for me just wouldn't work, and I know a lot of other people that are like that too. So that's definitely what helped with me. Like I said, meetings and working on myself with the whole honesty thing, because being dishonest was something that was very, very, even the littlest lies would all catch up with me eventually. Like I said, working a program, going to peer support, maintenance, and that's just what has helped me. Like I said, everybody's got their own way of getting here. As I say, if as long as you're not picking up, today, I think that's what matters.
So I think the last question is, do you have any advice for people listening or watching?
My advice would have to be is, don't be scared if, you're like me and you're out there actively using, or, that it could be scary at that time because nobody wants to go through that feeling. But I can guarantee you, if you pick up a phone or do whatever you need to do to try to get into a detox, or, because, for me, it did not work trying to do it on my own. Being at home, I literally had to go to a detox facility. It's not that bad. They really do help you. And it's so much better to live a life of not having to lie, cheat, and steal and do whatever for that drug. um there's always um a light at the end of the tunnel, and it might not feel like it because for years and years it didn't feel like it. But if I would have known that I could have done this a long time ago, and it wouldn't be as bad, I'd probably be a lot more, I just know that it helped me, and it could be a lot better. And there's nothing in this world that's worth using over, especially, drugs like heroin or meth, because those drugs will literally strip everything away from you. I think I seen the best thing on the internet, and it said, it showed a syringe, and it said all your life will fit into the syringe: your house, your car, your wife, your husband, your
Mm.
job, everything. You will lose everything. And that's so true, because I had everything and I've lost everything, and I've done it a couple of times. But it's so much easier living a life, like this, versus chasing that high, because just like I said, you'll never feel that same high. If anything, it's going to put you in the ground or put you in prison. So, detox and and, you know, doing whatever you need to do to stay sober and work on your recovery. I think that's what matters. And I think that's what a lot more people need to be accepting of, because we all have our own routes. And as long as we're not picking up, I think that's the most important thing. So
Some great advice. Some great advice. So I want to thank you today for coming on the show and doing this interview.
thank
How do you
you.
feel?
Definitely a humbling experience.
All right, cool. I really appreciate you coming on. And for everyone watching and listening, give us a like. Also, subscribe if you want to see more interviews. As we post them, you'll be notified. Also, check this out on Instagram, Twitter, Reddit. We're also on Facebook, where I suggest you go under the events tab in our Facebook group. And there you will see all the meetings we have. We do Zoom meetings daily at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. So that's all I have for today. And until next time.